Alrighty, and we are live today, and I'm super excited that you've joined me. This is Angela Brown, and for those of you that are just joining us for the first time, we're on a 12-part series to help you change your relationship with stuff. This is the Clutter Corner, and today we're doing something very special. We are talking about some submissions that we have received from a book that we are creating called Hoarding: Advice from a Friend. Now, what I love about this book is there are a whole bunch of people that are in our community that have been working through issues either by themselves or with family members or people that they love through decluttering and hoarding and renovating and downsizing and all different kinds of issues. But the storage unit industry is a $31 billion industry. And we're approaching an era right now where people are inheriting homes from their parents and from their loved ones, and their kids have moved away from home and they're stuck with stuff at home. There's this overwhelming sense of, oh my goodness, my house is full of stuff and I'm not using a good bit of it. So this is a really great time for us to really get a grasp on what it is we have inside our homes. Are we using it? And are we okay with that? If we're not using it, are we okay with getting rid of it? Now, today we're going to discuss kind of like the ugly side of getting rid of stuff. And this is when you've gotten rid of stuff, you've decluttered stuff, and then you were like, oh, I regret that. I wish I didn't give that away. Or I should have thought that through better, right? And what that comes down to is sometimes there are people in our lives that are inspiring us or pushing us or, encouraging us to get rid of stuff, and we may not be ready yet. So that's what today's conversation is about. All right, I want to hear from you guys. I've put a note over in the comments and then also in the description. If you guys would like to jump up here on camera with me and share your personal experience, I would love to hear from you firsthand. If you guys would like to participate in the book submission, we're so close on having it done, but we're still accepting submissions. So you can go over to hoardingworld.com and you can add your submission. It is not too late. And anybody that does add their submission does get a free copy of the book. And it's really pretty cool. Anyway, I'm going to share a couple of stories with you today about that so that you can kind of see some of the stuff that's coming in, because it's really interesting. Okay, so I'm super excited about this. I do have to say before we begin that hoarding is more widespread than we might suspect. It is claimed that affects 1 in 50 people, but it could be as high as 1 in 20, because a lot of people don't share their experiences. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a place that is safe so that people can share their stories. And by the time people reach a clinical psychologist or a therapist or something, often it's because they've gone through several steps of the journey and they are in a situation where they are trying to talk to friends and family and come to terms with it on their own. So really, there are a lot more people that are affected by this. We also want to remind you that we are a YouTube channel and we're not licensed therapists. We're house cleaners that have been in the house cleaning industry for 31 years. We've worked with thousands of families, and we've worked with families before they actually get to the medical level on a lot of times. A lot of times we're with the families before social services gets involved or before the adult protective services gets involved. So there are several varying stages of hoarding, and there are several levels. And so this is just our experience. So we do want to make that clear. All right, so on to today's show, Hoarding World. Why do people declutter, and why do people declutter sentimental items? So this is kind of a fun topic, and if you would like, I would love for you to leave comments in the sidebar so that I can answer those as we go. But one of the reasons that people hang on a second, I was going to show you my picture. I did that wrong. Whoa, me and technology. One of the reasons people declutter sentimental items, a couple of reasons first. One is that they're downsizing and they don't have room. So a move will force you to declutter things that you're not ready to declutter yet. You're not ready to go through the sentimental emotions of it yet. So that's one of the reasons why people declutter sentimental items. Another reason is oftentimes the sentimental value that it held at one point is often no longer relevant anymore in a person's life. So for example, if you had a whole bunch of photo albums that were about a wedding and they were beautiful and it held all this value and you spent thousands of dollars for this wedding and what have you, and then the marriage ended up in a divorce, for example, those relevant items from that wedding then become less sentimental than they were at one time. And so decluttering some of that stuff and getting rid of some of that is okay. But we have to start looking at the reasons in our lives. Why are we looking at decluttering? Okay. Because we don't want you to do it prematurely, because if they hold sentimental value, there's probably a reason to hang on to it. But if there's a reason that either the sentiment has lost its value, like in a divorce situation where those coveted pictures now don't mean as much as they once did, then it's okay to let go of those. And so just to have a conversation and say, hey, wait a second, why am I hanging on to these photos? I know when I went through my photo albums, I had a lot of family and relatives that had been divorced, but yet I was the one holding on to the pictures, and they were important to me, and I'm still friends with both parties. But I realized, even though I had copies and duplicates of those pictures, it didn't make sense for me to give them to anyone, because it would only bring up sad feelings to them. So I hung on to them for my own personal use, but I got rid of all the duplicates and stuff because it didn't really apply to anyone else, right? There you go. All right, interesting stuff. One of the stories that came in for our book, and I love these stories, these are really great. There's a guy who had a blender, and it was a really good blender. It was perfectly good. It worked. He used it. He made all kinds of smoothies. The end, right? It was perfect for him. He never needed another blender. Well, one day he was talking to a friend, and the friend said, hey, have you seen this new blender that's out? And the guy's like, I don't need a blender. I'm good. But his friend was telling him, did you know you can make soup with it? And he started explaining how you could throw in like raw carrots and potatoes and all this stuff, and you could blend it up and make a soup so that you're not using like a food processor. And he said, well, wait a second, that actually makes kind of a lot of sense. If I were to get a blender that could also shred and cut things up, that I'm not having 3 or 4 small appliances and just one. And the guy said, oh yeah, you can make pickle relish, you can make salsa, you can do all kinds of stuff with it. And he said, it's a commercial grade blender. You can throw ice cubes in there, you can throw in whole apples, you can throw in carrots. I mean, like the whole thing. And instead of having food waste at the end, it's just a better blender. So the guy goes online and he does a whole bunch of research. And one of the things that he discovers is it is, in fact, the same blender that they use in a lot of restaurants and a lot of bars. And they use it to mix up everything from, frosting to smoothies to, mixed drinks and whatever. And so all of a sudden you got like this coveted, this blender is better than the blender that I have. So he decided he's going to let go of the blender that he has, but he still had regrets because he's been through, a lot with this old blender of his. And so he said, if I get rid of it, then what happens? What does that mean? Does that mean that I didn't appreciate the old blender that I had? And the regret that he had was, I'm giving away something that's perfectly good because the old blender that I have still works. It's just not as good and as new as this fancy one. So while he was willing to get rid of the old one because he didn't need to, he went ahead and he invested in the new one because he discovered that right now at this particular time of his life, he was ready for a bigger, better blender that was better than the one he left behind. So sometimes people get rid of things, and even though there's a pang of regret, they're getting rid of something old for something that's new and that serves them better. So that was kind of a cool story. There is a question that comes up when we talk about decluttering, and it is, how rare is the item that you're getting rid of? A lot of people don't get rid of stuff because they have a perceived value that the item they're keeping is really valuable. And I don't mean in terms of sentimental value, but I mean in terms of actual value. And the question for you is, do you know what the value is of the items that you have gotten rid of, or the items that you haven't gotten rid of because of the perceived value? It's kind of a trick question. One of the things that's interesting to me in my own personal household, we have a whole bunch of really nice china. And I was given this china, I don't want to say how many years ago, but it's more like 30. It's been a long time. During the process, I used it, I don't know, once or twice a year, maybe like Thanksgiving or Christmas or whatever. So I was going to get rid of it. And my husband's like, don't get rid of that china. And I said, well, why? Because we don't really use it a lot. It's not our regular everyday go-to dishes. And he says, no, it's not our everyday go-to dishes. But what's important about this is, he said, it's valuable. Every one of those pieces is valuable. And he said, if someone else has a similar set and they've, for some reason, have dropped, chipped, cracked, broken one, we could even sell these in pieces, right? And he had this imaginary value placed on our china. And I kept thinking, well, it's not valuable to anyone if we're not using it. I mean, once or twice a year, yeah, I mean, that's great. But for the 1 or 2 times a year we use it, it's probably not worth it. So he was really of the sense that it was worth something. So one day I went online and I looked it up, and sadly, to my discovery, I realized it's a very popular piece of china. Yes, it has been around for 35, 45 years. So, I mean, it's like, approaching antique age if I were to hang on to it for another 10, 15 years. But it's not worth anything. Like every item, if I sold them off individually, are worth $3 a piece. And that's about what you pay for something brand new if you go down to Walmart, right? $3 a piece for a plate or a cup or something. It's not, maybe you get a little bit cheaper, but it's really not worth anything. So in the back of his mind, there was this perceived value of what is it worth? And a lot of people don't throw things away because of that perceived value. They think that in the back of their head that it's worth a whole lot of money when in fact it's not. So as I look at my china cabinet, and I still have it, and we did use it for Christmas this year when my family came, which is super cool because then my family was able to, I don't know, enjoy it for that once or twice a year that we actually use it. Is it worth anything? I don't know. I don't think so. All right. Can you replace the item you have with a better version for you? And this is a really great question. There's a story that came in, and this particular story was interesting to me because this was a picture of a woman who had inherited these weights from her dad, and her dad had since passed away. And so she was wanting to hang on to these weights because in the back of her mind, at some point, she was going to use them and she was going to get into shape. But the reality was she didn't ever use them. When she went to use them, they were too heavy for her and they were rusty, and she didn't really want to bring them in the house. So she had them out in the garage. And because they were out in the garage, it was too hot out in the garage for her to actually work out comfortably. And so when she would go out to work out, she would kind of like, oh, I'm so hot and sweaty. I just, I'll do it later. She kind of put it off and then didn't do it. But she didn't want to get rid of them for the longest time because they were her dad's. And because there was a sentimental value attached, before she even tried to give it away, there was regret. Okay. So her regret was not after she tossed it, but it was in the process of giving it away, coming to terms with, is it okay to give it away? Okay. What's interesting about this is one day they decided they were going to move, and she did give away the weights, and she completely regretted it. She felt horrible, miserable. I've given away this thing that belonged to my dad that was so important to my dad. My dad was always a believer in good health. He would have wanted me to have been healthy and what have you. She regretted it for a long period of time. So as she moved into her new house, she was working through some of those issues. And one of the things she discovered was that as she moved into her new place, she would get a new version of the weight equipment that better served her. And what's really interesting about this is it was new. It was updated. It was lighter weight. Like those other weights were really heavy for a woman her size to lift. And that really wasn't what she wanted to do. She didn't want to do the heavy weightlifting. She wanted a cardio machine. She wanted to do some Pilates. She wanted to do something that was slightly different. And the way that she helped to overcome that guilt and that regret was realizing that because her dad did value health and wellness, her dad would have wanted her to have found a particular set of weight equipment that would serve her and the lifestyle she was living right now in a way that would honor her and make her feel like she was, doing what was right for her. He would want her to be healthy. And this was a better version for her. So even though she was sad and she regretted having given away her dad's stuff, this was really a great kind of segue into, hey, I'm taking control of my own personal health and well-being. And this is something that my dad would have approved of, and he would have wanted this for me. And so that's how she came to terms with that. All right. There's a story that came in, and this is really sad for me because the woman that donated this story was a big fan of I forget the name, Salad Master cookware, I think it is. And it's like waterless cookware. You don't need oil. You don't need water. You just put your food in it. You put the lids on it. The lids create a seal. It cooks the stuff in there. It cooks it evenly. You can use it for all different sorts of things it's almost like a crock pot style, but it cooks much, much more quickly than a crock pot. But you don't need any seasonings and sauces and whatever. It's a really healthy way of cooking. And she bought this really expensive set of Salad Master cookware. And then when they got ready to move, she was going to have to get rid of it because the kitchen she was moving to didn't have the big cupboards that, she had before. And she was going to have to get rid of some of it. So as she was packing up her stuff, she was really sad because she's like, this is not going to work for me. And I might regret this later on. Well, as it turns out, they did pack everything up and they did move to a smaller place, and she did regret it. And so this wasn't one of those things where she's like, oh, I'm so glad I got rid of it. I now have more space in my house. It was a great decision for me to get rid of some of this stuff. It wasn't any of those things at all. She's like, every time I use it, I still feel sad that I had to give some of it away. But her consolation was knowing that she kept some of it. So she didn't give all of it away, but she gave away some of it. So when she still uses it, there's this pang of regret, like, ugh, I had to give some of this away. But she says she really enjoys the cookware she still has, because again, it's that really high quality and it will last for the rest of her life. So there are times that we give stuff away that we're not maybe quite ready to give it away yet. And maybe we gave it away for reasons that didn't necessarily agree with us, right? With her, she was moving it. She needed smaller space. And so that was her situation. But in the back of her mind, man, she still wishes she had it, right? So I'm curious, have you ever given something away where you wished that you'd kept it, or you discovered later that you had a situation where, I don't know, maybe you wish you didn't give it away? Interesting. It's a really, really interesting question and something interesting to explore. This was fun for me, and I enjoyed this one because this story is of a woman who didn't get rid of stuff for a very long time. Didn't get rid of it because she was afraid that she would be a bad parent if she got rid of her children's pictures that they drew when they were in school. The problem is she didn't actually know which one of her kids drew this, and she had a couple of kids. So when the kids came over, she asked her kids and she said, hey, did you draw this, these pictures when you were young? None of the kids could claim the pictures. None of them are like, oh yeah, I drew that one. And she said, well, I'm wanting to hang on to these because I don't want to be a bad parent and I don't want to throw away something that was important to one of you. But she'd never labeled the pictures, so she didn't know which of her kids had drawn them. Therefore, she was saving kids' pictures, thinking that one day she would give them back to her kids so they could give to their grandkids, who knows what. And all the kids are like, Mom, why are you saving this stuff? Toss it. We don't want it. We don't know who drew it. It doesn't mean anything to us. It was probably part of an assignment. We were bored one afternoon and the teacher was just keeping us busy. Throw away the stuff already. And so because they gave her permission, she threw it away. But for years, she'd been hanging on to it with this regret that, oh no, it's going to make me a bad parent if I throw away stuff that represents these moments in my kids' lives or whatever. The kids are like, we totally don't care, right? So sometimes we hang on to stuff even for the wrong reasons. And we have these weird false regrets, like she was regretting something that never happened. So we have false regrets about things we're going to toss that then it's not the case at all. So she did toss them. So the question comes to, if we're tossing stuff, do we have options for honoring an item that we decide not to keep? So if you are going to get rid of something and you say, I'm afraid that this will make me a bad parent or a bad spouse, or I won't be honoring my parent if I get rid of their stuff, what is that all about? Right? And are there options? I want to stop for a second and I want to remind you of something that happened to me. And this is personal to me. It's kind of a sidebar. We do have time and I want to go over it real quick because it's kind of a cool story. And it makes me stop to realize just how involved sometimes our families become when we don't clarify the importance to us, right? When we got married, and this is back in 2002. Back in 2002, somebody for a wedding present gave us this little frog, and it was an expensive little frog. And it was like a little frog that was made out of bronze, and he had like bronze colored clothes and stuff. And he was sitting on a mushroom reading a book. and it was kind of cool and it was kind of weird and I didn't know what to do with it. So it got put in a closet or something, never to be seen. And then the family relative that was coming over to visit was coming over. And I was like, oh, where's that thing that they gave us? And I wanted to honor them because we didn't know them very well. So I pulled out this little frog and I put it on the mantle, like on the bottom of the fireplace, there at the bottom of it. Anyway, they came over and they're like, oh, look, there's that frog that we gave you. Ah, and they got all excited about it. Okay, so what happened then is the family members that were there were like, oh, she likes frogs. So for the next birthday, the next Christmas, Mother's Day, Valentine's Day, whatever, anytime there was a chance to give a gift, the family members collectively went and got different types of frogs. And they got little frog figurines and they got frog action figures and they got frog calendars and plates and little ornaments and little rocks and stones that go out in your house, you know, that you put up going up to your walk that say welcome. And there were like little frogs and stuff on them, frogs sitting on rocks and little garden gnome-like frogs. And over the next 5 or 6 years, we collected gobs and gobs of frogs. I was like, what's with the frogs? And so I was like looking it up on the internet, like, do these bring good luck or whatever? And they don't. I was like, what on earth? Okay, so anyway, we've been married 10 years and now we have hundreds of frogs. And for every birthday, everybody would always give me frogs and frog t-shirts and frog sweaters and frog hats. And I don't even like frogs, right? I don't. But it occurred to me, and this was my aha moment. It occurred to me one day, what if I get hit by a bus and my family that lives 2,500 miles away comes to my funeral and they look at my house and my house is just overrun with frogs? They're going to say, oh my goodness, Angela had this thing for frogs. We didn't know. Like, this was really important to her. I mean, like, obviously, look at all the frogs, right? And they would have split up all the frogs between me and all my 19 brothers and sisters, their spouses, their kids, the nieces, nephews, grandkids, everybody. They would have, you know, shared all these frogs, and people would have been shipping them across the country and they would have hung on to them for years, thinking like they're hanging on to a piece of something that was important to me. They were never important to me. I have no idea why people gave me frogs. Maybe it was a joke and I wasn't in on it. I don't know. It had nothing to do with me. And so when we moved, the caveat is you can buy my house, but you got to take all the frogs. And I sold the frogs with the house. I said to the lady that bought the house, this brings good luck. These frogs are yours. I said, I don't care if you sell them on eBay. I don't care what you do with them, but they don't mean anything to me. All right, now I want to stop for just a second. The reason I tell you my story about the frogs is because I have no regrets from getting rid of all the frogs. But there are a lot of things that right now, we are dealing with inheriting things from family members that have passed away. Okay. Parents, elder parents, grandparents, whatever. We're ending up with a bunch of stuff. And we're going, oh my goodness, this must have meant a lot to my mother or to my grandmother. And we're hanging on to stuff. Did it really mean something to them, or did they just end up with some stuff? And the reason I have to ask is because my grandmother passed away. And when she passed away, she had all these weird, cool looking little figurines. And I knew that she collected them. And she had this really awesome handmade lamp that had like these little shelves and things on it where there were like little lights that were on there. And she would put these little tiny figurines. And it was really a cool thing. And I would go to the mall when I was young and, you know, I'd spend a lot of money on these little tiny extravagant little things that would catch light from every angle. And it would look awesome on this little shelf of hers. What I didn't know is it meant nothing to my grandmother either. It meant nothing. And what in the later years of my grandmother's life, she's like, hey, I don't know what to do with any of these. I've never known what to do with them, but the grandkids keep coming over and they keep giving me these. Do you want to find out who gave me which ones and give them back? Because maybe it meant something to the grandkids, but it never meant anything to me. And I don't want them to hang on to them on my behalf. And then I was like, oh my goodness, this was my grandmother's version of frogs. So I have to ask the question, because are we giving things away and then feeling bad about it because we have attached meaning or value to something that actually has no meaning and no value, right? It's a very, very interesting conversation. All right, so I want to continue here with the stories we've had that have come in. There is a woman that lived in a house for about 10 years, and it was time to renovate the house. She was going to do some updates. They were going to replace the floor or something. And so she decided this would be a really great opportunity for her to get rid of some of the furniture that she no longer needed or used. The kids had moved away. She didn't need great big tables with fold out leaves and all that stuff. It's just, it was kind of overkill. So regrettably, I'm going to have to get rid of all of this really awesome furniture, right? So she decided to make a list and contact friends and family. And she had an estate sale, garage sales. Family members were allowed to come pick out which items they wanted. And the family members that made an advancement towards it, like, hey, this is important to me, I would like to have this particular thing. She said, hey, it's yours. And she just gave it away. For those people that did not claim anything and did not want anything, she took the items and she bundled them up and she hauled them off. Now, what I don't know if you know or not, and I will leave links to this below in the notes below so that you guys can find, I think there are about 10 or 12 resources of places that will come to your house and they will pick up stuff that you no longer need or want. So if you're not in a position or you don't have a truck and you have big pieces of furniture or items like that you're not using, that you're done with, you can just take a picture of it and put it on like the Buy Nothing Marketplace. And I will leave links in the notes to that as well. If you don't know what that is, as well as the list of other places that will come to your house. They come pick it right up from your door. There's no cost. You just put it outside on the porch and they'll come get it. So that's pretty cool because there are a lot of people that do have stuff that like, hey, that's kind of an old sofa and what are we going to do with it, right? And so if you're not using it and you don't need it or want it, there's no sense hanging on to it. Right? No sense. Hello, Sarah. Hello, Patty G. It's so good to see you guys. And I'm great that I'm so happy that you're here. It's great to have you. But if you are not going to use something, and in this case, she wasn't, but she was giving herself permission to, hey, there might be something better. One of the really cool things about this particular story as we move on is that there was a family, a large family that really needed a table that had the leaves and everything that folded out. And so they were able to acquire her table and they were able to put it to really good use. And so where it was kind of a burden to her and it wasn't as important to her as maybe it was to them, this went to a family that was then able to get some really good use out of it. And it then became meaningful for them. So there are things that we have in our own lives that maybe we're done with it. And maybe we're kind of hanging on to it, but we're not really sure why. Oftentimes when we give that away to someone else, it puts us in a completely different frame of mind because it's like, hey, we were actually able to help these people. But instead of paying money or time or something we don't have, take the resources we do have and be able to help them in a way that is meaningful to them. So as we're getting rid of our stuff, do think about the other people that could use them. I know there are a lot of times growing up that my sisters and I would, we kind of would like some new clothes and we were all about the same size. So every time we'd get together for a family reunion, we would box up all of our not so famous clothes. These are not my best clothes or I don't want them anymore. I'm done with them or I wore them as long as I wanted or whatever. Pack them up in a box. And when we go to a family reunion, we do a swap. And so I'd come home with Julie's clothes and maybe a couple of Jennifer's clothes. And, we'd swap back and forth until we'd come back with still a box of clothes, but we weren't buying new clothes. We were kind of rotating and we lived 2,500 miles apart. So nobody saw their clothes and, whatever. It was really kind of a great way to share the goods without heavy regrets. And then in the rare event, I think only one thing ever got asked back for. Like, hey, you still have that item? Can I have it back? Because I was missing it and I regret it. And I think one item came back out of all the stuff we've traded and shared and bartered and given away over the years. So there's another way of doing that as well. But yeah, very interesting stories we've had coming in. There is one woman that decided to get rid of her cookbooks and she loved to cook. This was a really big thing for her. She was a fantastic cook, cooked her whole entire life and decided that as they were changing out their space in the kitchen, and I think they were getting a new fridge or something, that she would clear everything out. And then she made a tough decision. Am I going to hang on to these cookbooks or am I going to go ahead and clear them out and use this space for something else? And so in the process, she decided and discovered that all of the cookbooks that she had that she was using actually were online. Those recipes are still online. And so what does it mean if I get rid of the cookbooks? Does that mean I can never cook again? No, it doesn't mean that. What it means is I'll have to get the recipes from somewhere else. But what's really cool about finding recipes online, you can find them together as a team. You can have other people give you their favorite recipes. You can do a search for particular recipes. And I'll share a secret with you when I use recipes online. I always add the word killer to the front of whatever it is I'm looking for. So it'll be like killer potato salad or killer macaroni and cheese. And it always gets like 5 stars. They're like hundreds or thousands of ratings and reviews like, oh, this is the best meal ever. And so whenever I cook anything, which is very rare, you guys that know me know I don't cook very often. I just don't have time. But when I do cook and it's like this killer recipe, like this is so good, everybody's like, oh, this is fantastic. Can I get your recipe? And I don't have the recipe. It's not like in a recipe book or anything because I just pulled it up online, right? And of course you can search for like the ratings and reviews. You can search for who liked it best. I mean, it's kind of a fool's game as far as the best recipe ever. And so what I did recently, because we had a Christmas party and everybody's like, oh, I got to get your recipe or whatever. And I had copied it in advance. I was like, here's the link. And I sent it out with a mass email. Thanks for coming to the party. It was awesome to see you. Here's the recipe, So that's a great way to share the recipes now, is just online, where you don't have to have shelves of cookbooks that then over the years have grease and fingerprints and smudges and food and dust and stuff on them, right? It's just an easy way to get rid of some of that stuff and kind of start over again. And then when you are making a nice dish, and here's what's really cool. On our apps on our phones, we can just screenshot those recipes. And when we go to the grocery store, we can get the ingredients right then and there. And we don't have to be making separate lists and taking the cookbooks with us and all that stuff. It's amazing. I know. So cool, right? All righty. This is a tough one, because this is going through that. It looks like underneath the bathroom sink. And I don't know why, but everybody has a bunch of junk under their bathroom sink. And I say everybody, for the last 30 years, I think I've met 2 or 3 people where when you are hired to clean out their cupboards and you open up under the bathroom sink, I think I've seen 2 or 3 people where it was like really neat and tidy. And I was like, whoa, I mean, taken aback, like, whoa, how tidy it is. Most people have a version of this underneath their bathroom sink. And it could be stuff they're using. It could be stuff that's old. And most of it is half-used stuff. A lot of stuff is just kind of, how would you say, it's beyond expiration dates. Some of it is, I don't know, 2 for 1. They bought 2 for the price of 1. It was an extra. It might have been, they needed it for a special thing. Like maybe they had a rash or an itch or a burn or something, and they bought something, they used it for a few days, and then they didn't need it anymore. So it just went in the collective bin or whatever, right? Everybody has some version of this. Okay, so there's a woman who sent her story in, and she was getting rid of her supply of the stuff underneath the bathroom sink. She got rid of it, and she felt really good about it. And then a couple of days later, she needed one of the items that was there. And she was like, wait a second, I just threw that away. Then a couple of days later, she went through something else. She needed something else she had thrown away. And then she started getting really flustered with herself. Like, why did I throw that away? Knowing that she didn't use it. She wasn't using it. It was out of sight, out of mind. But what had happened was this. When she brought it out and refamiliarized herself with it, then in the back of her mind, she started thinking through ways that she might use it. So now she goes to wash her face and says, oh, actually, I could have used that cream I just threw away. And she got so mad at herself and feeling so much regret from giving this stuff away. She went out, I kid you not, she went out and she bought it all again. I kid you not. She bought it all again. All right, what's interesting about this story, because this makes us stop and look at our buying habits. If we're not ready to get rid of something, it is very possible, and most likely, we are going to replace it, okay? It is most likely we're going to replace it with the same or something similar, because in the back of our minds, we were not ready to get rid of it yet. Now, if we know we're going to get rid of something, and if we know that it's available and I could buy it at the store again, should I need it? If you give yourself permission that, hey, I can get rid of it right now, and then if I ever need it, I could buy it again, or buy a version that has not expired or that's updated or whatever, right? You know you can buy it again. Or what you can say is, instead of getting rid of all of it, let me just get rid of all of them except one hand lotion. Let me get rid of all the deodorants except one deodorant. Let me get rid of all of the foundations except one foundation. Let me get rid of all of the colored lipsticks that I don't wear except for the one shade that I do. Let me get rid of all of the fingernail polishes that I don't wear, that have like crystallized or they've dried out or whatever. They will never undry. Once they're destroyed, they're destroyed. They're out of date. They've expired, right? Get rid of all of those colors that you're not using and save the 1 or 2 colors that you do. It doesn't mean you have to get rid of everything, and it doesn't mean you have to purge of everything. But when she started bringing everything out, it reminded her that, oh, I should be using that. Oh yeah, that was great for my hair. That was great for my nails. That was great for my face, or whatever. And she'd thrown these things away. So she went out and repurchased them. So are you getting rid of them for the right reason is my question. Because if you don't, and you just throw stuff away to be throwing stuff away, and a lot of minimalists do this, they just throw stuff away to throw stuff away, but then they haven't resolved the reason why they had it in the first place or why they threw it out. And then they come to ill terms with themselves, having regrets, saying, man, I wish I'd thought that through better, right? So there's no rush. There's no rush if the stuff that you're saving is not causing anyone harm and you're not tripping over it and it's not, you're not in danger as a result of it. But if you are going to get rid of something, stop for a second and think through the reasons why. Think through the reasons why. Why am I getting rid of this? And are there times you are going to buy something? I want to share this with you for a minute because it's not anything we ever had. But my parents came to visit recently, and when they came, I didn't have the proper medical assisted devices in my home that I was going to need to make them comfortable. And they were only going to come for a weekend. So I didn't want to run out and buy a whole bunch of things like a toilet riser and the stands that you use when you get in and out of the shower and the bath mats and all of the things that you would use for someone of a certain age. I didn't want to buy all of that for a weekend, but I was going to need it for the weekend that they were here. And so what I did is I went down to the thrift store and I said, hey, maybe they have something like this already and I could clean it up and we could use it for the weekend. And when I got down there, there was an elder woman that had just gone in the store and she had donated a bunch of these items. And she was sitting at this table nearby. And I said, hey, you're kind of like guarding these items. Is it cool if I buy them? And she said, actually, I just donated them. And she said, and they brought them right in and said, maybe someone could use them for the holiday. And she said, and I'm sitting here regretting that I donated them. And I said, do you need them back? And she said, I don't need them back. I actually have new ones at home. And I said, well, I need them if you don't, because my parents are coming to town and they could really use them for the weekend. And she was like, oh, that's so great. And she felt really happy that I was going to buy them. And they weren't expensive. It was like, I got like 5 things for under $20. It was a great deal. But then it was comfortable when my parents came because they had the things that they needed so that they felt more stable while they were in my home. Okay. And then after it was over, oddly enough, they went home with my sister. My sister didn't have any of those things, but she had room in her car. So I packed up those things that I had purchased at the thrift store and we sanitized them and cleaned them up. They were nice that, that my parents had them to use, but I sent them home with my sister, who then was going to keep my parents for the next couple of days. And so they stayed with my sister for a week and she had all the stuff that she needed, right? So if you're going to buy some stuff, it's okay if you do. It's okay if you bring new stuff into your house with a reason. It's also okay if you let it go with a reason. I don't want to just hang on to it. Like, what if my parents ever come visit me again, right? I'm not going to hang on to it. They live 2,500 miles away. What are the odds that they're going to come use it again next week? Not very good. But they were going next week to go see my sister. So let me give this stuff to you right now and let my sister take it, right? So it easy come, easy go. That's how it was. And then in the event that my parents come visit me again, guess what? I know this secret. I can go back to the thrift store. They probably had somebody new that donated their stuff, right? I could buy new stuff again. Like I said, I got like 5 stuff for under $20. It was awesome. So there are ways to have stuff come into your life and there are ways to let it go. But the goal is to have it come in and welcome it when it comes into your world and welcome it when it goes out, and not get all hung up on the emotions and the regret and the overwhelm. And is that going to make me a bad person if I give my stuff up? It's not. You're not a bad person. Okay. It's part of the flow of life. You guys, it's so good to see you, Glenda and Sarah. Sarah says thinking through the reasons of giving away is a great point. Yes, it is. And it's going to keep us from regrets or from rebuying, right? This is an interesting story. This is a woman who had, a fashion sense, and she would buy one in every color. Doesn't matter what it was. She would buy one in every color. And it was intriguing to have this story come in because I know a lot of times people will, I don't want to say fall trap to a sale, but that's kind of what it is. People will get caught in, they go through the store and they say, hey, this particular item is on discount. and they've got this whole array of amazing colors. And you're like, well, if I like one, I'm going to like one in every color, right? And so she did. She bought a lot of coats. But where she lived, she probably used coats, a couple times a year. It wasn't like she needed a whole bunch of coats. And I too am guilty of that. I don't know why, but every year I ended up with a new set of coats, like one new coat every year for 5 or 6 years. And I had 5 or 6 coats. For me personally, I'm either leaving my house or I'm getting out of my car when I need a coat. So I narrowed it down. I said, I need 2 coats. I'll keep one in the car during the wintertime and one in my house. And if I leave the house and I need a coat, I have one. If I get out of my car and I need a coat, then I have one, right? That way I have the coats I need. And oddly enough, both of my coats are black. And so they look the same. It's, I think, the same coat twice. But now I have 2 versions of it. And so I don't need a whole closet full of a whole different colors. For this particular woman, because she didn't live in an area where she needed a new coat every day for some reason, what she did was she settled on 2 coats as well. And the 2 coats that she ended up with were really great coats that were stylish. They fit her. They kept her warm. They solved their purpose. And it was a great way for the story to end. She was able to then donate the coats, like to a coat drive, where there was no regret, but then knowing that, hey, if someone else can use the coats, I kind of need 2 or 1, and I've got 2 and they look good on me. And so, I can help someone else by giving my coat away. Patty brings up a really good point. Patty says, my struggle is that I'm emotionally attached to everything. I struggle with pulling off the Band-Aid. That's really a tough thing to deal with, because we have so many different reasons why we save stuff. And we have so many different reasons of why we could get rid of it and why we may not want to. And then if we do get rid of it, what happens? What happens? Did we resolve the issue? It's like the lady that was, I want to get rid of these kids' pictures, but I don't want to be a bad mom, right? She had equated in her mind, I'm a bad mother if I give away these pictures that my kids drew. And then when she had the conversation with her kids were like, no, you're not a bad mom at all. We don't know who drew the pictures and we don't care. It's like when my husband came home, and we've been talking a lot about decluttering in our home lately, simply for the fact that it's on the front of our minds, right? Ever since the COVID era, we've been doing a lot of decluttering and helping folks remove stuff from their homes. But my husband came home from being with his mom, and he said, my mom has this little dress that I was christened in, and it's some 50 years ago. He said it means something to her. And she was showing me this dress lovingly and saying, hey, when I pass on, you're going to get this dress or whatever. And she's hanging on to it for her reasons. But my husband came home. He said, what am I going to do with that dress? I can never wear it again, right? It's only this big. He said that dress means something to only 2 people in the entire world. And one of them, which is me, it means nothing to. So now it only means something to 1 person in the entire world, and that's my mom. And she's been hanging on to this my entire life, thinking that one day she's going to give it to me and I'm going to be super grateful that I got it. He's like, I don't remember wearing it. I mean, it was when he was born. He was christened in it. It was a special moment for her, but he said it wasn't a special moment for me. I don't remember it. I have pictures of it if I want to reference the picture. I don't want the physical fabric of the dress. It's like old and worn out and, aged now. I don't want it. I don't know what to do with it. And I don't know how to tell my mom, I don't care. I don't want it. And I said, it would probably be helpful for her to let her know that she's the only person that this means something to, because she has downsized. And as she is going through that phase of getting rid of the last of the things that are, taking up space in her home, she's hung onto this beautiful little dress for over 50 years. And it doesn't mean anything at all to him, and he doesn't want it. So yeah, there are times, and she probably is like the lady that had the pictures. She's probably trying to do right by her kids, right? She probably doesn't want to get rid of something that could mean something to him. And it might be the reason she brought it up. Like, hey, maybe if I just bring this up and we have a conversation. She's like, I don't want it. Are we in a position where we can be honest enough about the stuff that we don't want, that it's okay to say, hey guys, I don't want the frogs. And I did tell the family, I say, hey, listen, you guys have been giving me frogs forever. Thank you so much. I have more frogs than I could ever use in a lifetime. I'm going to sell them with the house. If there are any frogs that you gave me that you want back, that bring you good luck, or that means something to you, come over and get it. I've got friends of those frogs that you can take with you. You can take the ones you gave me. You can take all of them if you want. But if you want them, come get them now, because I'm going to sell them with the house, right? And nobody came and got any frogs. And so the reality is, when you let family members know the frogs don't mean anything to me, or the christening dress doesn't mean anything to me, a lot of times the family is, oh, what a relief. I've been storing this and hanging on to this and packing this up carefully from move to move to move to make sure that we honor that person, right? It might not mean anything to them at all. All right, this was an interesting story, and I'm excited to share this one with you. There is a woman who, against her wishes, if you will, and in lieu of her husband's prodding and encouragement, she got rid of this beautiful full-length mirror, and it was important to her. And once she got rid of it, she regretted it. Lots of regret. Didn't have a full-length mirror now in the house, and so wished she'd never gotten rid of it. And so her idea was, hey, I wish I would have thought that through a little bit better, because it was a really durable mirror. It was a really great mirror. It was standing the test of time. I could use it for the rest of my life. I liked it. I'm really sad now that it's gone. And in working through some of these issues, one of the things she discovered was that her husband worried about her. And he was worried that she had too much stuff and that some of it would become a trip hazard. And he was trying to help her downsize some of the things in her life, so that as she got on later in years, he knew she would not be able to move that by herself. If she was wanting to downsize and get a different home or what have you, she wouldn't be able to move that on her own. So the things that were smaller, that were more easy to maneuver, he was trying to help her because he really loves her and cares about her. So some of the people that come into our lives, it could be our kids, it could be our spouses, it could be our relatives, it could be friends that are encouraging us to downsize. A lot of times the issues on the table are not that they think that we just have a bunch of junk, but it's that they truly care and they want the best for us. And so they're trying to encourage us and give us little moments of like, do you need help moving that? Or, hey, there's a neighborhood yard sale. Let's, grab all your stuff and I'll help you and we'll put it out there and we'll sell it. And if the person is ready, that's super cool. And if the person is not ready, is there a rush? And I think that's really the next question. Is there a rush? Do you have to get rid of it today? And there are times in my house that I've tried to get rid of stuff and my husband's like, I'm not ready to get rid of that yet. And I'm like, well, we don't have to get rid of it. We have space. And it's not in the way. It's not going to hurt anything if you save it for another year. But we'll talk about it again in another year. And that is what we do in our household. One of the things that's interesting about our situation is we have a massive kitchen, and I don't cook, so it's like all these empty cupboards. When we got married, I had all of my dishes, and then my husband had all of his dishes. And then when we got married, we had a bunch of our dishes we got together, and then we had gifts that people gave us, and we ended up with like 5 sets of dishes. So in our decluttering process, I was going to get rid of one of the sets of dishes. My husband's like, don't get rid of that one. Don't get rid of that one. And it meant something to him. And I said, what does it mean? We never use it. In 20 years, we've never used that set of dishes, like not even once. He's like, don't get rid of them. Those bring me good luck. I said, okay. So we hung on to them. And then the next time I went through the cupboards, I brought them all out again. And I brought them all out again because I'm going to wipe down all the cupboards and I'm going to make sure that there's nothing stuck in the corners and no crumbs or whatever. As I brought them all out again, I left them on the counter. And I said, tell me, is now the time you're ready to get rid of these? She's like, no, don't get rid of those yet. Okay, no harm, no foul. It doesn't hurt anything if we hang on to them for a little bit longer. And I put them all back inside the cupboards. The next year, I brought them all out again. Is this the year? And he said, no, don't get rid of those yet. Okay. And it doesn't cause any harm if we hang on to them. We don't need them. And if we were to move right now, we would not take them with us. And so that might be the fail stop of how long we're going to keep them, is when we move again, maybe that's when we get rid of them. We had a conversation the other day. I got rid of some of my clothes. And this goes back to the picture we see on the screen of the husband that cares for his wife. My husband came to my closet. He said, what happened to all your clothes? And I said, which of my clothes are you missing? And he goes, well, I don't know, but I just see that there are less clothes in your closet. And I said, yeah. And which one of them are you missing? And he said, well, I don't know. Nothing jumps out at me. And I said, is there anything that I wore recently that you're sad if it went away? And he said, no. And I said, if something happened to me today, you'd be stuck with everything in my closet. What would you do with my clothes if something happened to me today and I could never wear them again? Like if I get hit by a bus. He said, that's a really interesting question because none of your clothes would fit me. I said, that's right. They wouldn't. What would you do with my clothes? He said, well, I don't know. You don't even have very cool clothes. Nobody would want your clothes. I said, that's my point. That's my exact point. These are my clothes. I got rid of my clothes. I'm not wearing them either. I have stuff in my closet I'm not wearing either. Even I don't want them. It's okay if I let them go. And he's like, oh, well, maybe I have clothes in my closet I could get rid of as well. Yes. Yes. That's what we're talking about. Go get rid of your own stuff, right? So we set the stage where we start living by example. We go through our stuff, we ask these questions, and we have conversations with the people that are in our home, with our children that are coming over, with our spouses. And we say, hey, listen, I'm going through this phase of my life right now. There's a box. It's a weird box at the top of the stairs, and it's just kind of an open box. And as I go through the house, if I run into something that I'm not using anymore, I say, you know what, that's been sitting around for a long time. I haven't used it in years. Why is it still here? And if I ask you about it, like, hey, are you using this? And you say no, I'm going to ask permission to put it in that box so that on Saturday, when the Hoarding World group goes and they do their weekly donations, that I can take my stuff to the donation center as well. I can take a picture of it and we're good to go. Is that cool with you? Oh, so that box means that if I don't want something anymore, it goes in the box and it goes away. Yeah, that's what that means. And so it's really cool because now as people are wandering through the house, they're like, hey, I have something I want to throw in that box. And they do. And if it's in the box, that means I'm good if it disappears. And a couple of times, I hate this, but a couple of times I put stuff in the box that was mine and it got pulled out of the box and put back. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess we're not ready to get rid of that yet. No harm, no foul. Okay. I was ready to get rid of it and I'm still ready to get rid of it. But if someone else in the house is not ready to get rid of it yet, no harm, no foul, right? It's not the end of the world. When the day is ready, they're ready to get rid of it. It's okay for them to put it in the box because I already did. I've already parted ways with it. And so a lot of times in our homes, we end up with stuff that it doesn't mean anything to us at all. So it's now time to have the conversation. And if you think that you're having some kind of a regret, work through that. Like, what's that all about? Why am I feeling regretful about getting rid of old weight equipment that belonged to my dad when in essence he had passed on? He wasn't going to use it anymore, right? And this woman decided that for her to honor her dad, the best way to honor her dad was to give away that stuff and then buy stuff that she would use because health and wellness was important to him. And she could honor that by getting something that was better suited for her, right? So there are times in our lives that while we think, oh, I'm not going to be honoring my dad. No, she actually honored her dad better by finding something that her dad would have wanted her to have that was suited for her, that was going to then keep her healthy. So interesting stuff. All right, we have time for a lightning round. Does anyone want to jump up here with me and say hi? I would love to have you guys jump in here and share your interesting stories with me. Sarah says, LOL, I was thinking the same for my clothes. Too many that I don't need and wouldn't want others to have to deal with if I weren't here. That is a true thing. That is really a true thing. Because a lot of the styles that we have or a lot of the clothes that we have are perfect for us, but they're not perfect for anyone else. And for the last, well, if you guys know me, for the last, 30 years, I've been wearing the same clothes. And I do because it's my house cleaning uniform, right? Nobody wants these. When I'm done, these don't get recycled. These don't get, I think they just get burned. You know what I mean? We've gone through the dryer and the washer so many times with these. They're so worn out by the time I'm done. And with all the wear and tear, nobody wants these clothes when I'm done. The problem, unsalvageable. Patty says, the interesting thing to me is that often I get rid of something and I never think about it again. I love that. Because if you get rid of something and you never think about it again, it's okay that you got rid of it, right? There are times that I've looked for stuff in the house. I'm like, did I get rid of that? Because I'm looking for something and I can't find it. And I wonder, is it that I was disorganized and I put it in the wrong place? Or is it that for some reason I did get rid of it and I didn't use it? One of the things that I'm thinking of is a little apple slicer. And it was a little cool looking little apple slicer that, the little core comes right out of the apple. And I thought, wow, my apple slicer is gone. Like, did I donate it? And I was like having moments of regret. I thought I donated my apple slicer. And then I stopped and I said, well, if I did, is it a deal breaker? Like, is this the end of the world? Well, no. Is there another way you could cut an apple? I'm like, well, I could go old fashioned. I could use a knife. Well, all right. Well, you don't know where the apple slicer is. So go ahead and go old fashioned and cut it with a knife. And I cut it with a knife, and within seconds I was eating an apple. And then I never thought about the apple slicer again. There are ways of working around it. During the holidays, I had one of those moments. I had a pinch of regret for a moment. I was, I guess when the kids were little, every Saturday we'd have what we called Super Saturday, and we would invite all the nieces and nephews over to play, and we would make cookies and pies and cupcakes and, decorative things. And I had a rolling pin for all the kids, and we would put all these, fun eatery things out, and the kids would all have their little mini rolling pins, and I had a great big rolling pin because I'm kind of like the king of it all. And at some point I got rid of all of the rolling pins, including mine. So now over the holidays, I was going to make a pie crust, and I realized I don't have a rolling pin. Oh my goodness, I don't have a rolling pin. Now I haven't even tried to use a rolling pin. I'm going to say 10 years. And so the fact that I don't have a rolling pin, it hit me for a second, and then I was like, oh, I threw away my rolling pin. And then I stopped and I said, if I was going to use and do a rolling pin motion, what would I do? And I said, well, I've got a heavy glass. It's just like a glass, like for a cup of water, but it's a heavy glass and it's completely round. And I've got this big cupboard. I'll just put a little bit of flour on the outside of this glass, and I'll just roll it in little segments. And I rolled the entire pie crust with a dinner glass made out of glass that was just round. And I was only ever going to use it for that one pie. Do you stop what you're doing and you run out and you buy a whole new rolling pin, or jump online and buy one from an online store and have it shipped to you the next day so you can roll one pie? No. What do you do instead? And oftentimes that's the answer. If we got rid of stuff that we're never going to use again, what do we use instead? For me, I used a knife for my apple, and I used a dinner glass for my rolling pin. We are creative, resourceful people, right? If we get rid of something, it's okay, right? I promise it's okay. Glenda says, the only things I've regretted getting rid of were a paper that I wrote in high school and my college ecology textbook. So then what did you do? I'm curious what happened next. She said the regrets came years later. So what did you do? I'm curious. What was the answer to that? How did you resolve that? I am eager to hear. The reason I bring this up, when you get rid of stuff, and I should warn you of this, the day will come when you will get rid of stuff and you will have regrets. And it's not the end of the world. It's a phase of moving through the new norm. We're creating a new norm for our lives of living with less stuff. And the reason I bring this up is because you don't go from having a lot of stuff or a house full of children and all of their stuff to going to empty nested and not going through some kind of a transition. And when you have relatives that have moved away, or if you go through a divorce, or if your kids move away from home, again, that's another transition. And with every transition comes a new opportunity to stop and say, why do I still have this stuff? Does it still serve me? Is it still the best representation of the space that I want to live in right now? And oftentimes we're getting rid of stuff, like the guy with the blender. He didn't want to get rid of the blender. His blender was perfectly good, but he got rid of it for something better that then did more things, that had better features, that then was going to work for him a lot better than for the rest of his life. And so if you're upgrading and you're getting like a final version that you're going to use for the rest of your life, make sure that it does suit your needs. Because just because you had something like the lady with the tables, just because you had something for 10 or 12 years, doesn't mean it's the only table you're allowed to have for your life. And it certainly doesn't mean that you need to have something that big if you have a very small space, or if you're only one person eating dinner every night. You don't need a great big old wampin table for 9 or 12 people, right? So there are options. And Glenda just caught up with us. I love this. She said, I just had to let it go, and the textbook would be very expensive to replace. I do want to say one thing about textbooks, and I'll let you guys go because I respect your time. But in going through a lot of textbooks with people that I've been working with over the last several years, many people are sad about their textbooks because it represents a time of their lives when they were in college, and the college years mean something to them. It was a time of happiness. It was a time of parties. It was a time of education and learning and growth. And when they get rid of those textbooks, it's like, I'm losing that knowledge and that education and those moments that I went through. The memories are still there and the knowledge is still there. Truth be known, if we were to go back to those textbooks, unless it's like some rare textbook that's no longer in print and you can't find it anymore, chances are the information is available on a whim just by doing a quick Google search. And instead of reading a whole entire textbook looking for that one or two things you need, just a targeted question on the search engine now can give you the exact information you need. The information that we're learning right now, most of the textbooks are moving online, and people are using online versions of it because they can be updated quicker and it reduces paper and all of those things. We're not storing musty books that could get chewed on by, rats or rain or whatever happens to books we save for long periods of time. So it is regretful and it's very tough because I know a lot of people that are like, I can get rid of everything in my house except my textbooks. And the reality is the stuff that's in the textbooks, oftentimes, including the world encyclopedias that we paid lots of money for, book by book, all that stuff can be found now online with the snap of a finger or a Google search. So just food for thought. All right, that is it for today. I appreciate you guys sharing my stories. And if you guys would like to share your own stories, like I said, we are still accepting right now submissions for that. And anybody that shares their stories with us, you do sign a waiver saying that I can share them with other people, but it's advice from a friend. These are other people going through the same exact issues that we're working with right now. And this is the advice and the suggestions that they give to us. So you can help me by adding your own submission over at hoardingworld.com. All right, we're going to be here again next week, same time, same place. And until then, have a great week, and I will see you guys then. Thanks for joining me today. Have a great week.